Well, folks, today is our last day to enjoy the beautiful banners, the poinsettias. In fact, if you bought a poinsettia, you might grab one today. The Advent candle, and all of our beautiful reminders of this season, because after today, it's all going to change. These first few days of the month of January always seem like a bit of a letdown after our Christmas and the festivities and celebrations leading up to it. Myself, after having company in my home for almost 2 full weeks, my husband and I were remarking on just how empty and lonely the house felt. Tomorrow seems to be the day where we all get back into our regular routines in earnest. Kids go back to school. We get around to throwing out the remnants of the holiday meals and get serious about making progress on those New Year's resolutions. And while we munch on king cake, the last of the Christmas decorations will be packed away. We may wonder in these days where the magic of Christmas has gone and why we can't seem to carry it with us throughout the year. This question has been gnawing at me, especially as just a week ago we were singing about peace on earth and goodwill toward all. And this week, our nation seems to be on the precipice of entering yet another war. We may all wonder just what all of this was for. The thing is, for us as people of faith, as disciples of Christ, Christmas is not just a season of merriment and gift-giving. While the wider culture moves on, we move closer to the heart of God as we continue to unpack the meaning of this great gift we've been given. The gift of Jesus Christ coming into the world and into our lives, of God becoming flesh and living among us. Or as the Message Bible translation puts it, the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. It is a truly remarkable gift. We're not yet done with this story of Christmas as it unfolds in our lives. Or perhaps the story of Christmas is not yet done with us. One of my favorite storytellers is the late radio personality and journalist Paul Harvey. I grew up listening to his program, The Rest of the Story, with my dad on Saturdays. I always loved listening to him weave his story and then provide the program's signature twist at the end. Today, I'm going to read to you one of Paul Harvey's perhaps most well-known stories, a Christmas story that he often told that first aired on ABC Radio on Christmas Eve in 1965. So Paul Harvey says, "Unable to trace its proper parentage, I have designated this as my Christmas story of the man and the birds. You know the story, the God born a man in a manger, and all that escapes some moderns, mostly, I think, because they seek complex answers to their questions, and this one is so utterly simple. So for the cynics and the skeptics and the unconvinced, I submit this modern parable. The man to whom I'm going to introduce you was not a Scrooge. He was a kind, decent, mostly good man, generous to his family, upright in his dealings with other men, but he just couldn't believe in all that incarnation stuff that the church proclaims at Christmas time. It just didn't make sense, and he was too honest to pretend otherwise. He just couldn't swallow the Jesus story about God coming to earth as a man. I'm truly sorry to distress you, he told his wife, but I'm not going with you to church this Christmas Eve. He said he'd feel like a hypocrite, that he'd much rather stay at home, but that he would wait up for them. So he stayed while they went to the midnight service. Shortly after the family drove away in the car, snow began to fall. He went to the window to watch the flurries getting heavier and heavier, and then went back to his fireside chair and began to read his newspaper. Minutes later, he was startled by a thudding sound, then another, and then another, a sort of thump or a thud. At first, he thought someone must be throwing snowballs against his living room window. But when he went to the front door to investigate, he found a flock of birds huddled miserably in the snow. They'd been caught in the storm and in desperate search for shelter had tried to fly through his large landscape window. Well, he couldn't let the poor creatures lie there and freeze, so he remembered the barn where his children stabled their pony. That would provide a warm shelter if he could direct the birds into it. Quickly he put on coats, galoshes, trampled through the deepening snow to the barn. He opened the doors wide and turned on the light. But the birds did not come in. He figured food would entice them. So he hurried back to the house, fetched breadcrumbs, and sprinkled them on the snow, making a trail to the yellow, lighted, wide-open doorway of the stable. But to his dismay, the birds ignored the breadcrumbs and continued to flap around helplessly in the snow. He tried catching them. He tried shooing them into the barn by walking around them, waving his arms. Instead, they scattered in every direction, except into the warm, lighted barn. And then he realized that they were afraid of him. To them, he reasoned, "I am a strange and terrifying creature. If only I could think of some way to let them know that they can trust me, that I'm not trying to hurt them, but to help them." But how? Because any move he made tended to frighten them, confuse them. They just would not follow. They would not be led or shooed because they feared him. If only I could be a bird, he thought to himself, and mingle with them and speak their language. Then I could tell them to not be afraid. Then I could show them the way to the safe, warm barn. But I would have to be one of them so they could see and hear and understand. At that moment, the church bells began to ring. The sound reached his ears above the sounds of the wind, and he stood there, listening to the bells, adeste fideles, listening to the bells, pealing the glad tidings of Christmas. And he sank to his knees in the snow. How many of us, too, question and have our doubts about the incarnation? I mean, how ridiculous and impractical does it seem sometimes that God, in all God's power and might, the great I Am, has chosen to save the world by becoming one of us, by becoming infleshed, as our scriptures say, in all our human frailties, to come to us as a tiny, vulnerable child. It seems, though, that this was the only way to get our attention, and Scripture indicates that this was part of the plan all along, from the beginning, that the fullness of God's love should be revealed, not just in the sacrificial death of Jesus Christ, but in his life. His life that demonstrates to us through his teachings, healings, and the ways he talked to and included others again and again, that in God's world, in God's kingdom, power is found in humility and value in the weak. Relationships are more important than the rules, and that ultimately love wins the day. God doesn't have to remain this complete and utter mystery to us. And as any good theologian will tell you, of course there is no way that we can know all there is to know about God. But we can know some things about God and God's character, because God has revealed God's very self to us in Jesus. Because of who God is, and not because of anything we have done, we receive gift after gift after gift. Peter Werner, an author and senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, says this about this great gift. Christmas is a reminder that while moral rules can be issued on stone tablets, grace and redemption are finally and fully found in the story of love, when the divine became human. We didn't enter Jesus' world, he entered ours. Because God has become one of us and shows us the way to love and the way to redemption and salvation through the life and light of Jesus Christ, we are now able to receive and to respond to God's incredible gifts of grace and love with genuine relationship that has the power to transform everything around us.